Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second Digital Swiss FP&A Board. And we have a very interesting subject today. It's about FP&A of the future, how to move from traditional to better and beyond budgeting. My name is Larissa Malnichuk. I'm Managing Director of International FP&A Board and CEO at FP&A Trends Group. And I'm so happy to welcome this international international digital meeting. The majority of you are coming from Switzerland. This is Swiss FP&A Board, but it's amazing. I have statistics here. So today we have representatives of 45 countries in reality, but more than 60% of you coming from Switzerland, and we have almost 500 registrations. Thank you so much for staying with us. Thank you so much for being part of our global community. And I would like to remind you about the main mission. The main mission for us is to share the latest trends and developments in modern financial planning and analysis. Just a quick reminder of our previous meetings in Switzerland. So previously, historically, we always had our meetings face-to-face. In fact, 11 face-to-face meetings in Geneva, 10 in Zurich. It was one of the first FP&A board that we established just outside of London. Those are amazing subjects that we covered. And this year we had only one face-to-face meeting, one in Zurich, one in Geneva at the beginning of the year. And obviously now we travel in the world digitally. A quick reminder about the agenda. So we will look at beyond budgeting, what it is. It is business agility in practice. We will look at Hilti case study on implementation of beyond budgeting, and then we will look at Roche case study as well, how this company recently moved to beyond budgeting process. And then obviously technology has the role to play in changing the budgeting culture, in changing the mindset. So how technology can enable the change. And of course, conclusions and recommendations as well. It's a great opportunity now to introduce to you our international panel, panel of experts, panel of thought leaders. Really proud of this representative speakers and facilitators today. So I would like to invite our panelists to open your camera, to switch on your camera, to switch on your microphones, and let us start with quick introductions. First of all, Bjarta Bogsnes, who is Senior Advisor Performance Framework at Equinor and also Chairman at BBRT. So the person who is well known and his name is really associated with the classics of beyond budgeting. I had opportunity to meet with Bjarta several times face to face, and we quote his books at many of those meetings around the globe. Bjarta, you're welcome. Welcome to the webinar. Welcome to the FP&A board. And today Bjarta is going to talk about, he will give us classical framework of what is beyond budgeting. The second panelist is Franz Winsperger, who is joining us from Zurich. Franz is former group CFO at Hilti, and he introduced beyond budgeting process in this organization. But recently, Franz is very busy with his new project, not so new anymore, but I know that it's a really innovative project. So this is Hilti and University at St. Gallen, former Hilti Academy, I believe. So looking at a framework of corporate performance management, and Franz today will share with us the case study, how it used to be and how it's happening right now in Hilti. Franz, you're welcome.
Thank you, Larissa. Looking forward to share.
The next panelist is Svenja Amhen, who is joining us from Stockholm. She's a member of our Stockholm FP&A board. Svenja is country CFO and licensed to operate lead at Roche. And what happened? Actually, company implemented beyond budgeting just recently. So we will have two case studies, mature example and just recent one. Svenja, you're welcome. It's so great to see you here.
Thank you, Larissa, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And finally, we have our thought leader from technology partner, Fabrizio Tocini, Global Head of Innovation at CCH Tagetik. So I had an opportunity to meet with Fabrizio in Benelux countries when he was a country director over there. So a lot of international experience, a lot of passion in technology. And Fabrizio is ambassador of how to use technology in order to change the culture and improve collaboration. Fabrizio, so happy to see you here.
I'm happy too. Thank you, Larissa, for the introduction.
Thank you so much. So Fabrizio, by the way, joined us from Italy, from Lucca. So we have different countries here. And Svenja joining us from Stockholm, Franz joining us from Zurich, and Bjarta is joining us from the mountains in Norway, I believe. So a very international panel. And I join you just from outside of London. I would like to invite you to switch off your cameras and microphones. Let me do a quick introduction. So very quickly to introduce you to our project, international project, International FP&A Board, 27 cities, 16 countries, 4 continents. And we have 2 chapters in Switzerland, Zurich and Geneva. Hope to see you all at the second half of the next year. We are planning face-to-face meetings starting from September, if the situation develops well. Just very quickly to update you on what is this FP&A Board webinar. So 90 minutes webinar. Your participation is welcome. Please use the polls in order to vote. Interactive Q&A session will be at the end of the meeting, but you can start sending your questions via the chat box straight away after the first presentation or during the first presentation. Networking is welcome, so you're welcome to join, to connect with all of those participants on LinkedIn with the panelists. Presentation is available right now in your handouts, but also we will send you the recording and presentation after the meeting within 2 days. And of course, it would be wonderful if you take part at the survey. And before we start, I would like to say thank you so much to our technology sponsor, CCH Tagetik, one of the global software providers for FP&A and for consolidation, with more than 1,000 customers around the globe. And in Switzerland, those are Swarovski, Nissan, Migros, and one of the largest tobacco companies, and many others. And of course, I would like to say thank you so much to our recruitment partner, Michael Page and Page Executive, one of the world's leading provider of professional recruitment services. Thank you for being with us, not only in Switzerland, but in many other countries around the globe. Let me put a quick framework before we start. I really like to demonstrate this slide at those meetings that are devoted to traditional budgeting process and moving to better or beyond budgeting, hockey stick forecasting. All of us who are in FP&A, obviously we know about this, you see. So this is a great indication of a dysfunctional nature of budgeting process. And it's happening not only in year 1, year 2, year 4 for strategic planning, but it's happening within our forecasting and budgeting processes. So let me give you this quick introductory quote that really describes what is beyond budgeting. And you know, this quote is really loved by our FP&A board members from around the globe. And it's coming from Bjarta Bognes, who is our speaker today. So the main purpose of beyond budgeting is liberation from dictatorship, micromanagement, number worshipping, calendar periods, hierarchies, secrecy, sticks and carrots. Okay, so this is the timing now to look at beyond budgeting concept. Bjarta, you're welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Larissa, and hello to everybody out there. It was in no way given that I should sit here today and talk about beyond budgeting, because my career started in a very different place. My first management job back in 1984 in Statoil, as we were called back then. Today we are called Equinor. My first management job was head of the corporate budget department. So trust me, I know what I'm talking about. I have never been happy with this process. And here you see my budget problem list, which is quite long. And as you can see, it goes way beyond the fact that this is a very time-consuming process. When I talk to executives, managers, even finance people, most people agree with most of these problems. At the same time, most organizations continue doing this stuff, which is interesting. And one reason could be that these problems are seen more as irritating itches and not symptoms of a bigger and more systemic problem. But that is exactly what they are. And that problem is also a paradox, because this process was invented roughly 100 years ago. It's pretty old management technology we are talking about. And in case you don't know, the inventor was Mr. James O. McKinsey, the founder of McKinsey Consulting. And I actually believe that he had the best of intentions. The purpose was to help organizations perform better. And I'm sure it worked 100 years ago, maybe even 50 years ago. But today, this way of thinking, this way of managing is doing exactly the opposite. It has become more of a barrier than a support for getting out the best possible performance in organizations. And that, my friends, I would call a pretty big problem. I'm sure that you recognize many of these problems yourself. You might hesitate on the last one, conflicting purposes. But that is actually also, or it's not just a problem, it is also a solution, because it has to do with asking ourselves, why do we budget? And most people would actually come up with 3 different purposes for why we budget. We use budgets to set targets, financial targets, sales targets, production targets. At the same time, our budget shall be a kind of forecast of what next year can look like in terms of cash flow, financial capacity. And last but not least, it is a resource allocation mechanism, handing out bags of money to the organization on OPEX and CAPEX. Next slide, please. It might seem very efficient to do all of these 3 things in one process, resulting in one set of numbers, but that is also the problem. Let me explain. Imagine that we are moving into a budget process. Upstairs in finance, we want to understand what next year could look like. We start on the revenue side, asking salespeople what your best number for next year. But everybody knows that the number I'm sending upstairs will come back to me as a target for next year, maybe with a bonus attached. That insight might do something to the level of numbers sent upstairs. Moving to OPEX, CAPEX, when we ask people for their best number, everybody knows that this is my only shot at getting access to resources for next year. And people also might remember that 20% cut from last year. And that insight and that memory might also do something with the numbers submitted. This is a problem, not just because it destroys the quality of numbers, but also because it stimulates behaviors that I would call at least borderline unethical. The lowballing, the gaming, the sandbagging, the resource hoarding, the internal negotiations, that is not the kind of behaviors we would like to see. Fortunately, as you can see on this slide, there is a simple solution. We can and probably should still do all these 3 things, but in 3 separate processes, because these are different things. A target is an aspiration. It is what we want to happen, while a forecast is an aspiration. It is what we think will happen, whether we like what we see or not. And resource allocation is about optimization, optimizing scarce resources to get to where we want to be. When we have separated, then we are opening up for this becoming different numbers, like for instance, targets and forecast. But even more importantly, it opens up a big improvement agenda. Now we can have great discussions about how we can improve the way we set targets, improve our forecasting process, and also improve the way we manage resources. And you see some headlines here of what this means. I don't have the time to go into detail, but just one quick example on resource allocation. At Equinor, we don't have an annual detailed investment budget. where we sit in the autumn and decide everything, that we shall invest exactly this much, split exactly on these projects, and then we are handing out these bags of money to each project on January 1. That's not what we do. Instead, we have a process inspired by the following. The bank is always open. The line can always forward a project for approval at any time. Whether you get a yes or no depends on two things. How good is your project, and can we afford it as things looks today? That information is, by the way, coming from what we call dynamic forecasting, a continuous business-driven forecasting process. Last but not least, when we have separated, then we can organize each of these processes on a rhythm, on a cadence that reflects not just each purpose, but also the type of business we are into. This is an important slide because if people say that it's impossible to operate without a budget, then my response would be, well, here we still do what the budget tried to do for us, but because we've separated, we can again improve each one radically. And this is also a safe, organic backdoor into the bigger beyond budgeting model, because when we have these discussions about how we can do these things better, we can be inspired and find guidance in the 12 beyond budgeting principles, which says something about how we shall organize, not just the three you see here, but also performance evaluation and rewards. And there is recommendation on rhythm. And even more importantly, there is guidance, inspiration about what kind of leadership must underpin and support the design of our management processes. Next slide, please. So these are the beyond budgeting principles. I don't have time to go through this in detail, but very important principles on the left-hand side around, for instance, purpose, values, transparency, and autonomy. On the right-hand side, you again recognize rhythm, target setting, planning, forecasting, resource allocation, and also performance evaluation and rewards. A very important principle in beyond budgeting is coherence between what we preach on the left-hand side, what we practice on the right-hand side. A classical example of the opposite. It doesn't help that we talk loud and warm on the left-hand side about how fantastic people we have on board, and we would be nothing without you, and we trust you so much, but not that much. Of course, we need detailed travel budgets. Hypocrisy is what I call it. These poisonous gaps between what we preach and what we practice. If you think that these principles are quite general, well, there are loads of practical advice that goes much deeper, available at the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable website and in numerous books written about beyond budgeting. Next slide, please. A number of companies are today on a beyond budgeting journey in some form or shape, and we will hear about two of them today. I could have talked for hours about fascinating management innovation taking place here. We don't have the time. So just one quick example. Some of you might know that a pioneer in beyond budgeting is a bank, a Swedish bank called Handelsbanken. You see them at the top of this slide. 850 branches in Northern Europe, quite big in the UK. And this bank has been operating since 1970, not just without budgets, but also without targets, without individual bonus. And by the way, they hardly do forecasting. But they have had a great performance throughout this period. Just fascinating. This is among, this bank has been performing financially better than the average of its competitors every year since 1972. That is, by the way, how they define performance. Again, a beyond budgeting principle, think in relative terms. This bank is among the most cost-effective universal banks in Europe, and they have never needed any bailout, any help from the authorities because they messed it up. Again, it can't be a coincidence. All that autonomy, all that transparency, all the decentralization, all the simplicity. Check them out, a very fascinating example. Next slide, please. This was the very, very short version of what beyond budgeting is about. It's almost impossible to cover this in such a short period. There are longer versions. Here is one. Here is more about everything, problems, more about beyond budgeting as such, more cases, more about the two cases I've been heading. The first one back in 1995, Borealis, and Statoil 10 years later. More about beyond budgeting and agile, because there are many similarities. And last but not least, implementation advice from these two journeys and from the 30 other companies I've helped going beyond budgeting. So thank you very much. I would like now to invite some of my fellow panelists for some comments, please. Thank you.
Bjarte, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and for sharing your passion for this philosophy. As I said, those of us in FP&A, especially if people are responsible for the global FP&A process, something that happened with me in the past, we all know how dysfunctional it could be and how it's all about negotiating the bonuses and you know, a lot of negotiations and a lot of time. So thank you so much for sharing this knowledge and sharing your passion. And also I would like to remind people that probably you are the only one person in the world who implemented beyond budgeting in 2 companies as a practitioner. So I don't know, maybe there are others now, but I remember that when we met in Stockholm, definitely it was the case. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Let us start the commentaries from our panelists. Franz, I would like to ask you to give your subject matter on this one. On this
Sure.
particular
Thanks for the invitation, and thank you, Bjarte, for this still exciting story, even more than 15 years after we met first. And it's still intriguing for me. I mean, what strikes me almost most in this beyond budgeting journey is that what you emphasized is this separation of the function of the budget. This seems obvious a little bit if in the hindsight, but it is not when you start off with it. And it does so much to the change. It changes really the entire system. I can talk from experience, and I think this is something really which worked out very well. And then I think also what I just like to highlight, also based on your presentation here and experience, that you talk about some changes in the practices, but you really talk about the change in the entire performance management model at the end, because it leads one step, builds after the next, and all of a sudden you look back and you change the entire model. And so this is really leading to a paradigm change away from this command and control. And I think this is the big difference to practices like better budgeting or advanced budgeting, which may bring some efficiency improvement, but never get you to that real impact you can have if you do what you just explained. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Franz. I would like to invite Svenja to give your commentary. Svenja, you're welcome.
Thank you, Larissa. Thank you, Bjarte, for sharing. I think this is so exciting. And I like very much how you start off. Nobody likes it. It doesn't work. Yes, we do it. And that's kind of crazy. So I'm happy to hear, and I know that it works in different ways. What really strikes me always is this clarity on principles and guidelines. I think this is so important to really get this going, but also on the other side, the clear transparency on how everything works, right? You shared that you have budget, the bank is open all the time. And I also think that's really what you need to do to get this going, to get people trust into the new way of doing it. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Svenja. Thank you, Bjarte. I think it's a timing now to check how things with beyond budgeting, how our participants are doing with beyond budgeting process. So I'm launching the first poll, and please, when you see it, if you can start voting, and please, can you choose only one version which is the best description for your organization right now. So where is your company in terms of beyond budgeting right now? The first version is starting a beyond budgeting journey. The second one, thinking about this. And the third one, not considering this at all. So let us start, let us continue. More than 50% of you voted. Just a few moments, just a few seconds. Let us give you just a few more seconds, and I'm closing the poll. I'm closing the poll and I'm sharing results with everyone. I'm sharing the results, and we can see that 15% already started the journey, 29% thinking about this, and 55% not considering this at all. Bjarte, what would be your commentary?
Well, trust me, these numbers look very different compared to when it all started 20 years ago. So I think these are numbers to be very optimistic about. And for the 55% that is not considering it, I have a little message for you at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bjarte. Thank you. Franz, what would be your commentary? Any surprises for you?
Yeah, actually, I think I second Bjarte's opinion. I'm a bit surprised that it is as much actually. In my reality, I feel that more companies still have a little bit shy, still away from it. But I'm encouraged by these numbers. It looks good.
I think this is the timing when FP&As and finance practitioners thinking about this, because at the beginning of this year, the world was full of dead budgets and unrealistic forecasts. So a huge message for all of us. Thank you so much, Franz. Thank you, Bjarte. Thank you to all those participants that voted. I hide it. The results are hidden now, and let us start look at the first case study. The practical example, Hilti case study of beyond budgeting and corporate performance management. Franz, you're welcome and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Larissa. Yeah, at Hilti, actually, our journey started really a little bit more than 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago. And it really started with this picture here. It started with a clash of paradigms, actually, between our performance management system and the cultural principles. In the performance management system, we did what most of the companies do still at the moment. We did classical command and control. We did it really hard. It's a technical company, a number-driven company, very ambitious people at the top. And we had a direct sales model, still have a direct sales model with a lot of target setting, a lot of carrots and incentives around. And so we had a lot of these typical problems which Bjarte just showed before. But on the other side, Hilti also had a very advanced status already on cultural principles. This was driven by the owner really long time back, decades, where the owner has a very simple formula which says, outstanding performance is actually driven by engaged employees. And in order to get engaged employees, you really need to have a purpose-driven and strong value-oriented management model, which really, triggers this intrinsic motivation, which is important for this sustainable and long-term performance, especially when you have a business model which thrives on innovation. And so we had a big clash here. We had the culture workshop on one day, and then we're going into the budget workshop the next day, and this was day and night. So we decided actually to change. We didn't accept that this is how we should put it up, and we decided to change. And next page, please. What we actually started to do is we felt we had to change the target setting system kind of intuitively and the incentive system. And we started to introduce what we call a relative North Star target system. Got away from this fixed budget targets and said what really counts right now is a few relative KPIs, strategic KPIs on growth, on profitability, on capital efficiency, which are clearly linked with the strategy. And we linked that with the incentive system and delinked it with the budget system. And started and looked at what's happening. We started first with the market organization to pilot this. And what we saw is that this entire behavior really changed very fast. We still were budgeting, but nobody really in this pilot group was really looking at the budget anymore. So this is where then I had the opportunity to meet first time Bjarte, where we got to know about beyond budgeting, where we are looking for more routines to really also tackle this issue of how can we actually get more agile in planning and so on and so forth. And we found that rolling planning and forecasting is actually a process which fits very, very well with these target setting systems. So what we actually did was intuitively we separated this function of the budget. We had the target setting function addressed with this North Star system, and then we introduced the rolling planning and forecasting system, which addressed the coordination function of the budget. We started measuring much more actual to actual, and actually measuring whether we are closing the gap for these few North Star targets or whether we're widening the gap. And this changed the entire system completely. It merged the strategic and operational planning process. And for Hilti, today and 15 years ago became true that planning is everything, but the plan is nothing. And this is what Mr. Eisenhower said when in 1995 the Allies invaded France and had to fight the Germans. This is really reality, and also today when we look at Corona, for example, this system serves extremely well actually and brings so much more flexibility. Now, we are all financial guys, and I know that this game changer was really the financial, this target setting system. I have brought some examples with me. Next page, please, to get a little bit deeper insight into this, what we call North Star target setting system. In fact, it's really a simple concept of Finance 101. Basically, we went away from setting absolute targets, but setting targets on relative drivers of value creation, on growth, on profitability and capital efficiency. On the growth side, we use more these outperformance targets, benchmarking to markets, to competition. But for profitability and capital efficiency targets, it's more inside looking. It's target ranges on the top of the group. And then we use this house of performance, we call it, this structure to cascade, basically to transform these growth targets from the group, which are tightly linked with the strategy, down into the major profit centers, service centers, and cost centers of the group. So this gives basically the structure of this target system. And we found that for more complex units like the market organizations, there is another step in this target system needed. Next page, please. Which is a rule-based system, a portfolio management approach. This is necessary, I think, for organizations which are really strongly number focused. There's organizations out there like Beate explained, which even work without targets. For Hilti, that wouldn't have been acceptable because it's an industrial company, quite complex business model. It's much more complex than a bank. So we use this portfolio approach for the markets, for example, but that is also very simple. Basically, as I explained, we divided the world into 4 clusters of value creation, those who create already a lot of values, and the 4th, which are turnaround cases. And then we established some rules how you derive from these strategic North Star targets some annual improvement targets along profitability and growth. And it's pretty simple. The rule is that if organizations are already highly profitable, then they should keep that and focus more on growth. There's rules for how much growth is good growth, depending on the size and also on the outperformance of the organization. So it's also always if-then rules. But if profitability drops back, then you have to improve more again, measured by a delta return on sales target every year. This is there since about 15 years, almost unchanged from the concept. It has been refined over time a little bit to tweak here and there after the financial crisis to emphasize a little bit more on profitability and so on and so forth. So this is, of course, a Hilti concept and made for the business model of Hilti, but our transfer experience has been that these principles behind can be transferred to any business model at the moment. And what we did now at Hilti, next page, please, since we saw that this system is really working well, and this is typical, if you get to know more about what works, you start also to see what you don't know. And so we started a cooperation like 7 years back with the University of St. Gallen, the Hilti Lab for Integrated Performance Management. And what we did there is first we brought in all our experience from practical experience to learn from also science a little bit more to what really happened. And we developed an integrated performance management model and a framework. And we describe there how leadership, financial leadership practices like this changing the budgeting system goes together with HR practices like incentive systems and the strategy implementation practices to really focus the entire system much more on the actions and not so much more on the outcomes of the targets. And we also learned in this transformation which happened at Hilti, what really drove performance was the systematic change of the performance management system away from a hierarchy supportive orientation to a more self-control supportive orientation. And we also learned that essentially it's simple. It's three main self-controlled building blocks, as we call them, which you can deploy. And the first one is a big one, and that's the good news for finance, to replace the planning and budgeting. And that's possible then to change the incentive system away in the direction of team results, not using incentives as an instrument of leadership, but more as a recognition of progress. And then finally, also changing your individual MBO approach. I mean, at the moment, I think 9 out of 10 organizations are working on this. So I've changed that already because it's not working anymore in a volatile environment. So if you do that, you change really the organization from a hierarchy supportive to a self-control supportive way. If you do it in the right way, and this is the key, the glue, which the integrated performance management model describes to hold this all together. And with that, you get a significant impact on the behavior of leadership and of members, team members. So that's basically the Hilti story. And the good news is that finance really sits here on a very strong lever to change that. And the good news is also that this transformation is really possible. And you do not need to do that all at once. You can approach it from different ways and avenues and do it step by step in an evolutionary way. I know that this is working. I know that there's also other ways, but the question is which way is faster? And we have learned in Hilti this is a very fast way. Thank you very much for your attention to this case. And yeah, please feedback from my colleagues.
Franz, thank you so much for sharing your experience, for sharing your case study, and for sharing your thought leadership with us. I would like to ask Svenja to comment on this.
Thank you, Franz. What I like very much with what you described is the purpose-driven approach, how you really align the company value to the purpose of what a budget or your approach could deliver. And I think the transparency you shared about where's the priority, where should you invest, where should you not invest, this is really so crucial. And that's something we also are working on. We're still iterating on it, but you really feel how this is so important to help teams take the right decisions. Thank you for sharing, Franz.
Thanks, Svenja, for the comments.
Thank you so much, Svenja. And Bjarte, what would be your comment, please, on this case study?
Well, first of all, I think this is solid proof that Hilti is a brave company, because going beyond budgeting more than 15 years ago, that shows courage. It was much more scary back then than what it is today when so many companies are on this journey. So I think that's one reflection. And also, as you might have understood, beyond budgeting can be about improving finance processes, budgeting only. But if it becomes much more powerful, if it becomes part of an organizational transformation, as we talked about here. So beyond budgeting can be both. It can be just improve, or it can be transform. If you really want the sustainable long-term impacts, it should be transform. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bjarte.
Thank you so much, Bjarte. I think it's a good timing now for the next polling question, and for us to understand whether cultural change is already happening in the organization. So what is your senior leadership approach to traditional budgeting process? So I'm launching the poll, and I would like to ask you to start voting as soon as you see it. So what is the best description for your organization? Is your senior leadership ready to move away from budgets as a control mechanism The first option is no, having control is important to them. The second one, some parts of the organizations are ready. And the third one, our senior leaders trust people to take the right decisions. So please, if you can continue vote. I can see that more than 55% of you voted. Just a few seconds before I close the polling question. I'm closing the poll right now, and I'm sharing the results. So as you can see, for 58% of our participants, control is still important to senior managers. But 28%, some part of organization are ready to move away from traditional budgeting. And actually 13% already on this journey. Franz, what would be your commentary on this?
Yeah, I'm not surprised about these answers. I think this is also my experience. I'd like to those who have voted that no, having control is important to the senior leaders. You know, I have met a lot of these people and still meet, and I think that none of them actually has said that, you know, this approach, what we describe, for example, in our integrated performance manager approach, would not work in their company. It is more a question of whether they see how they can control, you know, in a different way. Because what you do with this approach, with what Beyond Budgeting is describing, what we describe with the approach, is not giving up control. You just have a different form of control, which is much more effective. And I think budget is a key. Target setting system is a key, for example, to see how you can actually do that differently, you know, and have even more control of the organization by that way, because you steer much more strategically and actually get much better in implementing the strategy and avoid all that sand in your eyes, which comes in with the budget. I think that is key. So I'm trying to say, hey, trust, there is ways, and you can convince a lot of those, I think, senior managers if you show how you can control differently.
Thank you, Franz. Svenja, what would be your key takeaways from those?
I couldn't agree more to Franz, but I would say the 28% I find very encouraging, because that means there is a large part that is ready to try, and you really should try.
Absolutely. Good. Absolutely. And from my side, you know, travel in the world and in many chapters, we already had Beyond Budgeting or Better Budgeting discussions. One of the biggest problems that people have, the first one is how we're going to motivate our salespeople, how we can go into negotiate the targets. And the second one, it's all about the corporate communication for the listed companies. So how listed organizations will communicate budget to the outside world. So those are the key questions, but I'm sure that the next presentation from Svenja will answer those as well. I know that Frank already mentioned the corporate performance management and the targets and bonuses. Let us look at the next case study. So I'm hiding the results, and we are moving on to the next case study. There isn't one. Svenja, the stage is yours. You're welcome. So let us look at Roche case study on moving beyond budgeting just recently. You're welcome.
Thank you, Larissa. And I think you can move straight to the next slide. Hello, everyone, also from my side. You might have heard more medical advances at less cost to the society is the really bold vision we in Roche are working towards. And you all might think, well, then going beyond budget is kind of not intuitive, but this is what we've done. And I will share with you the story of the Swedish affiliate. And you will also hear how trust is so important to enable this transformation and what role finance plays in that. On the next slide, you can see a quote from our current pharma CEO. And this quote really describes what the finance team in Sweden was aiming to get. In 2018, the Pharma Finance division decided to move away from a large part of the planning process because it was broken, as we heard before. And my Swedish colleagues took the opportunity and said they want to take this one step further. They had the vision to enable the organization to spend time where it matters, with our customers, driving advances for our patients. Their vision was to enable the business to spend as much time as they could with customers instead of being busy with planning over and over and over again. And when sharing this vision, they really got support from our pharma CFO to test this idea. On the next slide, you can see a patient before and after cancer treatment. Across our company, we feel a very strong connection to our company purpose, delivering better outcomes to more patients faster. Starting from this vision, the aim of the finance team in Sweden was to move from the question of, do I have budget for this, to the question, is it the right thing to do for our patients? We really wanted both finance and the business partners to have time to focus on the work that matters for our patients, understanding needs and creating value for customers. The finance team wanted to enable the business to start thinking differently, no longer having to protect their budgets or think about how to save budget into the next year and fight and defend. They really wanted them to think about opportunities and how they could leverage this and how this could be done. Instead of a budget defining what they could do, it should be guided by strategies and customer needs. You might wonder how we made this happen. On the next slide, you can see my colleagues in the German affiliate. And to me, this picture really shows the importance of conversations. And that's what my team in Sweden did. They started clear communications with the business and made sure to also confirm there is no secret budget in the background. The next step was then creating transparency on priorities. In a budget world, it's so okay if senior management really knows what the priorities are, because they will distribute the budget. In a world with no budget, you need to make sure that teams are aware, because they are the ones taking the decision. Also, reporting is an important one. Traditional finance spends a lot of time and effort creating reports. My team today still is doing reports, but the focus has changed. A large part of the report is actually developed in collaboration with the teams. It's a platform for teams to share their insights on products they are working on. We still have overviews on costs and sales, but in a very different context. We do not look at plan versus actual, but we look at the full year prediction. And very important, we started to share this report with everyone in the Swedish affiliate, not just the management team. Now, some of you might wonder, really? No budget? How does this work in a company that is listed on the stock exchange? And in Roche, we have a reputation of being reliable in our communication. That's, of course, a reputation we don't want to risk. How do we bridge this? As an affiliate, we share both costs and sales expectations with the division. We still look at forecasts. We still build sales forecasts. But the difference is we do not engage the whole company in a many months long exercise. We define with the teams when we need to establish or adjust the forecast. And then that's what we do for one product. As an affiliate, our target is no longer tied to sales forecast, at least not to ours. All of the affiliates share the same total forecast across the division. And this has also helped us to really move away from gambling and gaming with numbers, but instead working together. And then for global, to finalize the forecast that then is shared with external, they build on a mix of local input and predictive modeling. And all these components together has enabled all of us to focus on what really matters without losing sight of the big picture. Next slide. I cannot see you, but I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and let me take some of them that I recently or always get. Where are we now, and what is the finance team doing with the freed up time? Well, we still operate without budgets, and our business partners really appreciate this. They also appreciate how my team has moved from being purely financial analysts to being more holistic analysts. They look at the full business information, market and competitive and all that's required. And we just recently reflected this in the title. My team is now called Business Analyst Partners. Instead of drafting and redrafting budgets, they engage with the teams to better understand their strategies so they can deliver information that is relevant to them. But I also have to say the team is not the same size as before. We just recently went through a major transformation in all of Sweden, and also finance got reduced. And that's mostly because of the impact the No Budget initiative has. We are now more right-sized for the roles we are playing. Some of you might wonder if COVID did change something. And the clear answer is no. Actually, it has served us really well. The fact that our business partners never had to engage in various cycles of assessing and reassessing the budget has enabled them to engage with the customers, really understanding what is required in the healthcare system and working with the system to enable solutions. Of course, did COVID impact our assumptions, but instead of reassessing all of them all the time, we made sure to focus on those that really had an impact and involved only those people from the business teams that we really needed. On a global scale, the no budget approach has enabled us to start up trials in record time, adjust manufacturing capacities, and to create solutions with the ecosystem in service of our patients. Next slide. Before I close, I want to share a few learnings with you. First and foremost, you need strong senior leadership support. Without this, the approach will not fly. It's very easy for senior leaders to install secret budget processes. So they need to be aligned on the goals, and they need to trust the team take the right decision. That's absolutely vital. Second is transparency on priorities. I said that before, and you've seen it in the previous examples as well. Informed decisions can only happen when teams have transparency on the context they are operating in. Third, not to underestimate, a finance team that's well connected to the business. If the business teams see finance as the place to do budgets, you might move yourself out of business within short. Make sure to establish a strong partnership where the business teams understand the value a strong finance business partner can bring beyond budget planning. And lastly, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. It's really, really easy to find small pockets to test, to find the parts where you can do this, and then infect larger parts of the company. And if any one of you considers to embark on a similar journey, it requires a lot of trust, but it will also require easy tools for the business teams to support their decision. Mindset change is really essential. And the last word, be prepared. If you do this, you might realize how much time the whole business is involved in budget planning. And when you take this away, how much time they will have to spend with the customer. Imagine the impact this could happen. So I really encourage you, go back, think about where you could test this, even small parts, and try and see for yourself. Thank you. Now I'm looking forward to hearing from my fellow panelists.
Thank you so much, Svenja. Amazing example, amazing case study. Thank you for sharing it. Franz, what would be your commentaries?
Well, first, thank you very much, Svenja. It's really exciting for me to see somebody like you, a few years younger than myself, I think. I have been working on this like more than 20 years, like Beate, and now to see somebody with that excitement talking from a large organization like Roche, who has actually moved in this direction. I think that this is really this Christmas present for us. It's great. I think it's also a great example that you can do that in large organization, starting in the division, for example. There's so many good points you made, actually. I don't have enough time to comment, but the most important thing is, I think it has become very clear in your presentation that this starting point of customer focus and purpose, this no nonsense type of approach from a very advanced leadership perspective, is a real key to get this started. Also, the trust of leadership, this helps definitely. although I've said before that it can be done differently also if you show how you can do it. I think a lot more leaders will come along, but it is much easier if you have trusting and leader who support that way. And finally, I think what I also like a lot is what you emphasized is this impact the whole thing had on the finance function, the business partner vision, which is behind it. And I have the same experience. It's the fastest way to become a real good business partner, to do that. There's no better way in my experience. Thank you so much for this exciting example.
Thank you, Franz.
Thank you, Franz. Thank you, Svenja. I would like to ask Fabrizio to comment on this. Fabrizio, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. There are several points that are very strong in the presentation of Svenja, but I would like to underline a couple of them. First of all, the importance of engaging people with a clear and effective target. I come from an experience where an organization is likely to adopt a new technology. This is involving, obviously, a realization of a project to implement this new technology in the organization. If you do not assess clearly where you are at the beginning and where you want to go at the end, this can cause an endless project that is creating and causing always frustration and unhappiness. So it's really important to set a clearly understandable target and reachable target. The second point that attracted me, it was the capability to nimbly react to the COVID scenario, because of this agility on reforecasting and redoing discussion directly with the customer. In our experience, several people and several companies in the market during the pandemic asked us a new solution for reforecast, to do scenario planning and those kind of analysis, because they were unable to react immediately to what happened. So the fact that you are agile is really creating a competitive advantage.
Thank you, Fabrizio.
Thank you so much, Fabrizio. Thank you, Svenja. And now let us see what is happening in the world of our participants with their third polling question. Let me launch the third one, and it's about your current annual budgeting process. Namely, how quick or how long is this process? So this is the indication for us what time you can receive, what time could be released as the result of beyond budgeting implementation. So how long is your current annual budgeting process? Please continue to vote. Is it less than 1 month, between 1 and 3 months, between 4 and 6 months, or maybe it's even over 6 months, or maybe you don't have budgets at all? So please continue to vote. More than 50% of you voted. Just a few more seconds. Just choose one option. And I'm about to close this one. So I'm closing the poll and I'm sharing the results with everyone. So you can see that 8% of our participants have a budgeting process that is quite quick, at less than 1 month. But 47% it's in between of 1 and 3 months, 33% between 4 and 6, 7% over 6 months, and 5% already went beyond budgeting, no budget process at all. Svenja, what would be your commentaries?
Yeah, first of all, I'm happy to see that there is already a part that goes less than 1 month, and it is doable. The other ones that are more on the longer end, 3, 4, or even longer than 6 months, I encourage you to think about the impact it has on your business partners and how you can make this as lean as possible so you can really enable them to go outside, see the customer, understand what their needs is, and bring this back to the company so you can work with the customer in mind.
Thank you, Svenja. Fabrizio, what would be your commentary on this?
Yeah, this is roughly in line with what we see also into the market. And it's always difficult to understand where people are consuming time, if it is on negotiating a new position, new budget, a new target, etc. But I can provide my point of view from a technological standpoint. There are several steps in the preparation of the budget that can be optimized adopting newest technology. For example, the preparation of the data. Lots of people are spending lots of manual work on preparing data, cleaning data, and try to have reliable data. The second aspect is also on doing and conducting a sort of what-if analysis. It's very difficult, normally, artificious to, in some way, assume a new assumption and try to understand what can be the future under a different light. So these couple of things normally are really creating a little bit of bottleneck, and so as a technological provider, we can help on it, obviously.
Thank you so much, Fabrizio. From my side, I would say that I see positive shift in the duration of budgeting and planning processes. So only 5 years ago, especially the bigger, large organizations, international ones, it was really practically unrealistic for them to have budgeting process less than 6 months. And we can see that now it's shifted from 1 to 3 months. The majority of people are there. And we see more and more organizations that are quite flexible and dynamic. But it's also so pleasant to see those 5% that already do not do budget at all. And of course, 7% still at this range of long budgeting negotiation process. Not surprising when at the beginning of the next year, some people ask for the adjustments to their budget. And this is almost like a continuation of this process because so many things happen. So thank you for votes. Thank you for your commentaries. Let me hide the results and let us move on to the next and last presentation. So obviously with all of those technological changes, technology can help. Technology can help not only with collaborative planning and with the easiness and speed of planning, but also technology can help to change the culture. So let us see and let us hear from Fabrizio Tocini, Global Head of Innovation at CCH Tagetik. Fabrizio, you're welcome.
Thank you, Larissa. So bio-budgeting forces to rethink the way to do budgeting, as we saw from Bjarte, Svenja, and Fran's presentation. And it is by definition a cultural change. It is well proven that the technology can help of engaging people. Why? Because at the end of the day, you need to have insight of what the market is doing and how the action you took are realizing their effect. You need then to take new decisions and to take new action. So how easy is to access the information, how easy is to consume the information, the data, and act on the data, and the business, and how easy is to take the business actions play really a role, a crucial role in this journey. One of the pillars of the beyond budgeting is devolution. We have to put the frontline people into the condition to take informed decision. To do that, obviously, they need reliable data. And in order to take the right decision, they have to align also with the overall strategy of the company. In order to be aligned, they need the collaboration. And they need to talk and do conversation, like Svenja said during the presentation. Also, in this case, the technology can help a lot. When you are doing as a frontline person your action, you have to be autonomous. You cannot always ask for help from IT or from other people. If you want to define a new report, if you want to do a change assumption in a plan, if you want to do scenario planning, etc., you should be in the condition to have a sort of self-service experience. The new user experience frontier are really leveraging advanced technology, mainly in the area of artificial intelligence, like, for example, the natural language processing, that is allowing people to define verbally, for example, the content of a new report. In that, there are other techniques like behavior analytics that are in some way studying what are the action that a person and a user is doing with the tool, in order to suggest the next move, to suggest the next action at the next access. In order to be agile to react to the market condition, you have to access the information anytime, anywhere. To do that, we have now a very powerful cloud-based approach that are allowing people to connect with any kind of device wherever in the world with immediate access to the information. And this is crucial in order to react wherever you are. In order to translate ambition to action, obviously you need to define measurable KPIs. And you have also to have a clear evidence on the factors that are also named the drivers that are affecting the most the result of your business. AI, artificial intelligence, mainly with the machine learning component, is assisting people on fast modeling the business behavior, mainly considering also external factors and external variables like pandemic rates or whatever we are familiar nowadays, unfortunately. When you have availability and you collected internal and external information, you should be able to reforecast on demand. It means that you have to reproject immediately the future landscape according to the action you took. This is also something that can be solved brilliantly by technology, for example, adopting predictive analytics technique. But let us move to the next slide to see the technology in action in a typical case. So what we said already, it is that the developed, the managed process is one of the pillars of the beyond budgeting. So the frontline people able to act immediately in front of the customer. First of all, there is in the value chain the setting of the strategy. This strategy should be measurable with dedicated KPIs that can be financial, non-financial, statistical, and whatever. In this case, the digitalization of a company plays a huge role. Why? Because first of all is creating the condition to measure the performances. And secondly is because it's automating all the activities that are not really providing an added value to the end users. After, this vision should be shared with the people, with the front line. In this case, the front line should know also the boundaries and values within which they have to act. For this purpose, the strong process governance and the workflow capabilities that the technology are allowing at this moment in terms of collaboration tools are really key. To access the information, obviously, we already discussed about the possibility to use cloud-based approach that are allowing people to connect from everywhere and using whatever tool they have at that moment, a mobile phone, a tablet, a notebook, whatever. To measure performances, we have to define KPIs, we said. To do that, we need something easy to do for the end user in order to allow the so-called self-service BI. This is something that can accelerate the execution. After that, to navigate the performances and to have insight from the market, you need obviously to access reporting. And in order to define a new report, we already said that there are now very advanced techniques like natural language that are allowing people to do not have the necessity of long training curve and IT skills, but they can use their natural language to drive and steer the technology to execute what is asking for. After having the insight, obviously, the new action can be unlocked in order to react to new condition. But going to the next slide, we can say how the, in some way, the market responsive strategy, the previous one, please, it's again enabled by technology. First of all, we have to, as I said, get insight from what is happening into the market, also considering external information like weather conditions, customer trends, those kind of things. In this case, the machine learning technique and so the artificial intelligence landscape is helping a lot. Why? Because it's able to capture a set of data that are representing the behavior of the market, compare this data with your historical performances, and find correlation and pairing the behavior of the external world with what you executed in the past. In this way, sometimes it is able to provide you the evidence of what are the factors that are affecting the most your capability to execute. If you understand what is important for you in terms of drivers and factors, you can have a conscious decision-making process. And so you can act exactly on the factors that are affecting the most your performances. This is really an enabler on being more effective and reach more accuracy of what you want to predict for your future landscape. Then if we go to the conclusion, to the end slide, we talked several times about artificial intelligence as an enabler and an accelerator of the execution, but this is really the new frontier of technology that we see as useful to help people on executing properly their strategy, and is accompanying the beyond budgeting journey in a very clever way. I'm open to the comments of my colleagues.
Thank you so much, Fabrizio. Thank you for sharing your experience and thought leadership. Bjarte, what would be your subject matter expertise on this one?
Thank you, Fabrizio. First of all, I want to say that in Beyond Budgeting, we are in a way software agnostics. That doesn't mean that technology is not important. That's not what I'm saying. And if I'm looking back at my own experience in Equinor, then of course technology has played a role. And for instance, in 2 areas, transparency. It's very hard to create transparency without technology. So here, systems have played a key role. And there's also the issue of one version of the truth, which is also very important. But that was looking backwards, and now, Fabrizio, you've been looking forward, and it seems like that list of potential benefits from technology into what we have been talking about has become much longer. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bjarte. Svenja, what would be your commentaries on this?
Yes, first of all, thank you, Fabrizio. I think it's super exciting what nowadays is all possible. And what I like very much is how you highlight the opportunity to really integrate external and internal information, because that's then the trick to get you to fast decision to what is happening in the market. And also, as you have it here on the slide, the predictive analytics, that's something we also build heavily on. That's what enables our global organization to still respond to what we need to do from an external perspective. And that's so important, because that just, gives you the freedom that you need to really go beyond budgets from a system perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Svenja. Thank you, Fabrizio. Now we would like to open our fourth and last polling question, and we would like to hear from you, how do you currently use technology? So I'm launching the poll, and if you can start voting as soon as you see the options. Please choose one of the polling options. How do you currently use technology in your organization? We use technology to empower and drive cultural change. We use technology primarily as a driver of efficiency. We use technology primarily to strengthen command and control. Please, if you can continue to vote. Almost 50% of you, more than 50% of you voted. Just a few seconds, and I'm closing the poll right now. And I'm sharing the results. So 15% of the companies use technology to empower and drive cultural change. 63% use this for efficiency, and 22% still use this to strengthen command and control. Fabrizio, what would be your commentary on this?
I was expecting this answer because really the first quick win, it is really to increase the efficiency, removing from the table all the time spent on unuseful activities from a business standpoint. So, as I said before, the preparation of the information, the manual data entry, the several activities on trying to adjust figures, etc., should be reduced at the minimum level in order to regain the time to invest on business analysis and reaction. I will not neglect in any case and underestimate the importance of the other 2 points as well, obviously, because our focus and targets also for ourselves, for our strategy, because to allow people to change the culture in a more agile method to apply to their business is something that is a mantra of our vision for the future, and is in some ways driving also our product roadmap. As a company, as a software company, we adopt agile technique in our development team, in our daily execution. So we changed really the culture thanks to the new point of view provided by technology.
Thank you so much, Fabrizio. Thank you so much, everyone who voted. And now, before we start Q&A session, and just a quick reminder that you can send your questions through text box. We already have a lot of them, but don't worry, even if we don't have enough time to answer your questions in real time, we will be able to do this offline and send this to you via email. Now I would like to ask all our panelists to open your camera and switch on your microphone, because we are starting the key takeaways. So quick 30-second takeaways from all the sessions. And I would like to start from Bjarte. Bjarte, what would you like our participants to remember from today's session?
I want you to reflect on the following. The things that we've been talking about today, it will happen. I don't care if it's going to be called beyond budgeting or business agility. I couldn't care less, but it will happen. And I'm convinced that in 15, 20 years time, when we look back at what was mainstream management in 2020, I think we will smile, even laugh a bit, just like we today smile about the days before the internet. And how long is that? And as organizations, we can choose to be early movers, vanguards, and get competitive advantage out of this. Or we can choose to be dragged into this as one of the last ones. I think I know what my choice would have been. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bjarte. Thank you, Franz. What would be your key 30 seconds takeaways?
Thank you. Yes, I think what sticks with me most is this issue about control, about the fear of losing control. I fully second what Bjarte said. Now is the time, really, and it will get not better but worse in terms of managing this environment. And my message to the participant out there is just think about that. You don't lose control. There's methods out there where you improve control in this environment. Actually, you lose more and more control if you don't change. This is actually my experience, and that's why I'd like to keep that with leave that with the participants and encourage them to really try this change. Again, there's methods out there which help you to improve your control by becoming more agile and going actually in the direction of beyond budgeting.
Thank you, Franz. A great reminder. Svenja, what would be your key 30 seconds takeaways?
Yes, building on what Bjarte said about which choice do you take? Do you want to be an early mover or a late adopter? Keep in mind, Roche is a very, very big company and it works. So there is really no limits to this. It's something that you can implement wherever you are, be it big or small companies. And also keep in mind, it will have a huge impact on your business, because when your business can start to focus on where the value is created, imagine what you'd unlock, what type of potential is coming through that. So this should be your takeaway from the session.
Thank you so much, Svenja. Fabrizio, your key takeaways, please.
Yes, I think the quicker takeaway is let the technology help you on taking informed decision anytime and everywhere you are, in order to react easily to the changed new market conditions, to collaborate more strongly with your peers and with your colleague, and to enjoy your daily experience in the job, because technology can be also funny.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. And let me officially open the Q&A session right now. We have a lot of questions, but I would like to encourage everyone to continue to send your questions to us, because even if we don't have enough time to answer now in the next 10 minutes or so, we will be able to do this offline. Okay, so first question is to you, Bjarte. Bjarte, is it possible to have beyond budgeting in a non-agile organization? What would be your answer?
Well, if you define beyond budgeting as business agility, the answer is obviously no.
Okay, so it's a short answer. That is why I would like to straight away.
But let me elaborate a little bit. As I said, me elaborate a little bit. As I said, you can, if you only, I mean, you can get some benefits out of only addressing the budgeting process, separate and kind of improve each one a little bit. And that can also take place in a non-agile organization. But again, if you want the full benefit of this, you have to, and you should make this broader, which means that it is business agility you are moving into.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for your answer. And the next question is to you, Franz.
Mm-hmm.
Greetings from Geneva. I would be interested to understand what are the prerequisites for a company governance and senior management buy-in to be able to initiate the change to beyond budgeting. So what would be your answer, Franz?
Yeah, that's it's not an easy answer, I think, because it depends a little bit where the organization is standing on. You know, I think there's no one answer to it. But I come back to what I said before. Basically, my experience is that, you know, showing the top management that the management is actually not losing control by moving in this way, but actually applying instruments, you know, in a different way. I think that would be the prerequisite, if you wish, so that that this is explained to the organization. Yeah. That this is understood. You know, if this is not understood, if top management fears that you lose control with that, then you probably will not go that way. But it's actually easy to do that, the opposite, to explain that. I think there's a lot of people out there who are receptive to that, who actually are at the moment fearful of losing control.
Thank you so much, Franz. Thank you. The next question is to you, Svenja. And obviously, it's coming, we have several questions regarding the approach of standard costing. Obviously, in our traditional management accounting methods, this is what we use, and variance analysis as well. So, Svenja, with your beyond budgeting journey, how would you deal with the standard costing, price, volume, mix, for supply chain, for distribution of business, comparing to the external benchmark that is supposed to be used? So what would be your answer to this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'm really not an expert on supply chain, but I'm happy. I just last week was involved in a meeting where a colleague from this organization shared. So I'm happy to share back what I learned. The fact that we are adjusting the budget on a regular basis, right? We are adjusting a forecast for a product when we learn things are changing, also means that there is no need to ask for an update of data in the system. You just take whatever you have because that's the most recent knowledge we have. And that enables the supply chain organization to act much faster, to be much more focused in their approach as well, because they know what is sitting there is the most recent information. So in our case, I know they also are working towards a much more leaner, much more streamlined, much more centralized approach to try to take as many benefits as possible from this approach.
Thank you so much, Svenja. And now the question to you, Fabrizio. How to ensure that the modern technology enhancing the agility and collaboration process in the company, but and not enhancing the level of control? So what would be your advice on this, Fabrizio?
So when we talk about collaboration, there are several aspects. There is the conversational aspects that has been already highlighted also by Svenja during her speech. That is obviously from a technology point of view is indicating to us to embed in the tooling that are using budgeting, planning, and forecasting, for example, the possibility to interact between users, either on demand. It means that something like chat or messaging system, etc., but also triggered by event. Like, for example, we have a typical example when there is a company in an organization that is providing services for another company, then the revenues of that one is causing the cost of the counterpart. So in some way, when the first one is planning to have services, this should unlock in some way an automatic communication, and it should involve the counterpart to discuss about this forced cost planned by the partner company. So there are several aspects, more operational or more conversational, that can be addressed.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Fabrizio. And now we have time only for the last question that I would like to address to everyone. And if you can answer like in the 10-20 seconds, so only one point, because the question is, what is the good starting point for beyond budgeting from your point of view? Bjarte, what would be your key point?
Start with separating the budget purposes. Once you have done that, once you start to work on improving each one, you are on a beyond budgeting journey.
Excellent. Thank you. Franz, what would be your one advice?
I would actually give the same advice, but even narrow it a little bit further and say start with changing your routine of target setting. Yeah, start to work with strategic targets and find a way how you lead with that, and then change your incentive system with that, and you'll make a first significant change in this direction.
Excellent. Thank you. Svenja, what would be your one advice?
My one advice would be align it, look how you can align it to your company values. Is there one question then you can use as leading questions to assess if what you're doing is the right thing to do instead of budgets?
Thank you, Svenja. And Fabrizio, your one piece of advice. Where to start?
Yes. So assess where you are, think and clarify where you want to go, and do not implement a big bang, but do agile sprint, having a quick win in order to engage people and to keep high the level of enthusiasm.
Excellent. Thank you so much, panel. Thank you. Let me, with this last question, to close our Q&A session. But again, to remind to our participants that every question would be answered. We didn't have enough time for all questions, but we will address your questions. So you can continue to send the questions. With this, I would like to say thank you so much to our esteemed panel. Thank you so much for being with us, for for sharing this experience, incredible experience from different angles. Thank you for your collaboration and for your passion. And thank you for moving our FP&A profession to the next level. Really, really appreciate it. I also would like to say thank you so much to all our participants. Thank you so much for being with us today. And finally, I would like to say thank you so much to our sponsors, to CCH Tagetik and Michael Page, for supporting us on this journey of digital FP&A boards and sharing the latest trends in developments in our profession. But before we say goodbye to everyone, just a quick reminder, we already started to plan next year. 4th of February, we will have our third Digital Swiss FP&A Board, and it will be about scenario planning and what are the key success factors for FP&A in order to implement agile and flexible process. We are planning 3 meetings next year, so 2 of them will be digital, but starting from September, we're hoping that the world will be back to normal. At least, you know, we already have some prerequisites for this here in the UK and in Europe and in many other countries around the globe. Thank you so much. And before you go, please, can you kindly stay connected with us and share case studies, experience, thought leadership practices. And before we close this webinar, you will have opportunity to fill your survey to let us know how we performed today and what we can improve. Thank you so much, our panelists, Svenja, Fabrizia, Franz, Bjarte. See you very soon in person.
See you
All
soon.
the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All the
Bye-bye.
best.
Bye.